Hello and welcome back to the internet. I hope you guys enjoyed the long cat video compilation, but now it's time to get back to a regular video, starting with my uncle who wants a better phone than what we give him. So my mom's job gives her a phone for free to use for work purposes, and recently she got a new one from her job, so she could afford to give away or sell her existing one, which was an iPhone 6. My uncle, who knew this, asked her if she had a phone to give away to him, since he needed a new phone and couldn't afford one. My mom offered to give him the iPhone 6, and I kid you not, he actually turns his nose up at it and goes like, "Only an iPhone 6? I wanted an iPhone 10. I don't want it anymore." Like, okay, sure. We can't even afford an iPhone 10 on our own, and you expect an iPhone 10 from us? In your dreams, maybe. You know, whenever we have a Choosing Beggars story, I usually like to start it off. It really gets the blood boiling right off the bat, you know? Catcalling a girl while her nose is bleeding is never a good idea. So my story happened today, like half an hour ago. So I live in a neighborhood where everyone has a gate in their front yard. All houses are facing the main street, and it's not unusual for people to approach the gates and ask for directions or try and sell you some MLM crap. I'm very prone to nosebleeds. As soon as I get the slightest cold and my nose gets just slightly irritated, it starts bleeding, which is annoying in on itself. So today, while I was out in my yard hanging the laundry out to dry, my nose starts bleeding. So I went and stuck a sheet of rolled up toilet paper in my nostrils to stop the flow, and went out again to continue doing my chore. As I was hanging the laundry, a boy who was maybe 13 or 14 approached my gate. I thought he came here, like most people, to ask for directions or to try and sell me something, but it turned out very different. "Hello, gorgeous," he said cheerfully. Of course I was annoyed by this, so I just looked at him for a second without responding and went back to doing my thing. "What are you doing?" Another attempt at initiating a conversation. "Isn't it obvious?" I responded, getting more annoyed by him, but I don't like confrontation, so I just hoped he'd get the hint and go away. Boy, was I wrong. "Why's that thing up your nose?" "Okay, bro, now you're seriously getting annoying." "And what do you think?" I replied in a more annoyed tone, since I was seriously getting pissed at this point. "You should take it out. You'd look prettier." "Okay, what the F? Seriously, you'd look prettier? Is that seriously what you say to someone whose freaking nose is bleeding?" Well, since he was so convinced that I'd look prettier without the thing that's preventing me from bleeding out, I decided to show it to him just how pretty I can be. Removed my nose tampon, and lo and behold, my nose starts bleeding immediately. Blood was dripping down from my nose and to my chin, and thankfully it didn't end up on my clothes. He looked freaking terrified, which was a good thing. He tried to apologize or something, but I quickly rushed inside so I can clean myself up a little. By the time I cleaned up and changed my nose tampon, he was gone, presumably because he was so traumatized by the sight of my bleeding face. He was gone, my nose was secured, and I could continue hanging the laundry in peace. Yeah, I think that some people don't quite understand here that when you put a tissue in your nose, it's really meant as a fashion statement. You're trying to get compliments about it. You know, funny enough, I've actually gotten a lot of nosebleeds over the years too. I used to get them like crazy, but I've only ever used a tampon in my nose for one of those occasions. Now we have another story from TalesFromTheSquadCar. "Sir, you can't search me, I'm a lesbian." So I'm a correctional officer that works in a dedicated mental health unit for the criminally insane and those deemed incompetent due to mental health reasons. It makes for a very interesting 12-hour night shift most of the time. So myself, along with several other officers, are a roving response team that is dispatched when things got too real. The town our compound is in is very small, and we even help the local PD with searches and arrests if needed. So with that little bit of background, let's move on to the fun. It was a dark and stormy night. It's typically how most people who view where I work thinks every one of my stories should start off. But it wasn't. It was night, so it was really dark, but it was humid and hot outside. So we did our best to stay inside the muster room between regular security rounds. It's Sunday, which means it's our last day of the 3-day rotation. Myself and other officers are begging every higher power for a nice slow night before our weekend. But as things go, one of us must have offended one of those deities, because... Dispatch to response team, Alpha Dorm is requesting backup for a fight in progress. Also be advised we're showing a man down alarm. Copy dispatch en route. We all look at each other, trying to pinpoint the person who obviously had said the worst curse words known to man. "It's going to be a quiet night." Or some variation of that sentence. We take off running to that dorm and they pop us in. Response team to dispatch show us on scene. We enter the dorm, and in the literal minute it took us to get there, the dorm staff had separated the two individuals fighting. We have 2 officers sit on the 2 fighting, and go in search of the staff who activated the alarm, and to secure all those not involved in their rooms. Once we found all staff assigned to the dorm, we found out the alarm was an accident, so luckily no harmed staff. Now for the fun part, time to ask questions and find out why the fight started, to see who was the aggressive party. I approached the first subject, and the one not currently being attended to by medical staff, and found out the other individual had decided he was going to bully a much weaker and younger guy. He had asked him to stop, the other guy decided he didn't care, and started bouncing the other guy's head off the brick wall. So he stepped in and did a rather good job of stopping the threat. I pulled the staff aside and asked them what happened, and found out he was telling the truth. So it's pretty cut and dry. I go along with the other officers to the second individual, who is bleeding and very unhappy about his loss, so much that he's crying. The medical then tells me they want him moved to a triage to check for any hidden injuries. Cool, no problem, but we have to search and shackle before we move, because 1, he is aggressive, and 2, it's night and it's policy. So another officer steps over to said man, and the conversation goes like this. Says, "Sir, at this time I'm going to have to search you before you go into triage." He says, "You can't do that, it's against the law, I know my rights." "Sir, it's not against the law, it has to be done, so just work with us so you can be looked at in medical." "No, you cannot search me, I will sue all of you." At that time, the senior officer steps up and asks the man why he thinks it's illegal, trying to find a way to de-escalate the situation. "Because I identify as lesbian, and only a woman or another lesbian can legally search me, so get away from me." So me, being me, and already tired, and seriously tired of this stupid crap, step in. So another officer says, "Sir, you're in luck. I too identify as lesbian. So spread your legs, put your hands on the wall, and let's get this done." The guy says, "Finally, someone who knows the law around here." Response to dispatch, we have 1-10-15, 10-51 to triage. All staff 10-4 with no injuries to report. Man down was a false alarm. Shows us 10-98 and able to respond. Geez, the things I see in here. Man, all I gotta say is that we are moving into some seriously weird times where people think they can just randomly claim to identify as something and then just change the law around themselves. But let's try not to get too deep into that and just move along. My teenage sister got kicked out of the house for refusing to pawn her PlayStation. So my mother and stepfather pawned our stuff a lot when we were children. I would come home most days to find that my gaming console or other belongings were gone. There were never any apologies. My parents told us they needed the money. Eventually, my grandma bought my sister a new PlayStation to play with, since my parents pawned the one she had previously. She loves the console to death, and is to this day a devoted gamer. But the pawning was not just restricted to the purchases of the parents, so my sister made it a habit of taking the console with her when she left the house. We were getting ready to spend this afternoon out last year when my mother stomps in, demanding that she give up the PS4. My sister tried to run past her, but my mother attacked her. She yanked my sister's hair and tried to dig in her backpack. The whole time she was screaming, "I'm your mother, and everything that is under this roof belongs to me." When my sister got outside, my mother screamed, "You are no longer welcome in this house." My sister did not return since. She lives with our grandmother and I. I'm her older sister, and had the sense to leave that hellhole 2 years before my sister did. She was 16 and I was 18 when it happened. You gotta love those entitled parents that think their children are basically their property. It's a good thing these kids were at least old enough to move out at that point. The day my homeowners association crumbled. So this happened a few years back. Our HOA has always been known to be sneaky and to flat out give false accusations on homeowners. Especially in this day with security cameras, and we can pretty easily spot out who the investigators are. Most recently, a homeowner was told she was supposed to get approval before she started re-shingling her roof. The thing is, her roof hadn't been re-shingled in 10 years, and she had no plans to do it. Things like that. Call it just a mistake, call it malicious. Well, a few years ago, we had our time to shine. It was a simple morning. I was still temporarily living with my father at the time. Well, one morning we decided to go out to get groceries, when we found his pickup truck had been smashed into. Nothing was taken, it was just smashed into. In fact, I still have pictures from this day, just before the cops arrived. The cops arrive, they do some investigating, and find out that the rock inside the truck was from a house down the street. Unfortunately, they couldn't get them to admit to the crime, nor could they prove it was even them. Understandable, criminals will grab things they find, but it was suspicious. The rock, I should say, was a special kind of rock that no one else in the neighborhood had. Some round polish type, very unique. After the incident, I installed a security camera on his house. Well, not 2 days later, we get an HOA violation for a vehicle eyesore that needed to be removed. Just 2 days later. I'm confused how such a letter could have been written up so fast, but I started to suspect foul play. One day, we were home and had a knock on the door. The HOA actually called a code inspection officer. The week hadn't even been over yet, so the parts to fix the truck weren't delivered yet. We were paying expedited shipping for damages we didn't cause, and the truck was so old, insurance would probably just total it. The truck is sentimental to him, so he wasn't going to get rid of it. It still ran great. The code inspection tells my father that vehicles which do not run need to be removed. They both stop talking and take a second, and both almost say at the same time, "Do I know you?" Turns out the code inspection officer went to the same church as my father, and knew each other. So this isn't the malicious compliance yet, we are only just beginning. The officer tells my father if he can show the truck starts, he's going to write it up as being in code. My father starts the truck just fine, as the engine isn't damaged. He tells him to go on with his day and have a good one. At this point, we're furious because we're starting to suspect the HOA may have did this, and there's no way they could have possibly known so fast. Unfortunately, our turn of the street had no neighbors with security cameras until I installed one on our house, so it caught nothing specific to our incident. Down the street, these people supposedly broke into a car as well, but the camera on their house was unable to see anything. Darn. Here's where the fun begins. Fast forward a couple months after nothing happened, I decided to install a new dash cam in my car. I found a good one that uses very little power off the battery, and can activate if there's any bumps to the car, even if the car is off. A few days later, we got a violation notice for our mailbox being crooked. It wasn't crooked much, but I do remember it recently having an angle. Odd, I could have just fixed it. But my car was aiming straight at the mailbox. I'm thinking, no, this couldn't be possible. It only records if there's a bump. I take out the memory card, and apparently I either didn't configure it correctly, but it was recording the whole time. It never went into sleep mode. I watched as the investigator walks up to the mailbox and pushes it crooked, then writes down on his tablet his findings and takes a picture for records. I'm appalled at what I see. I have the proof I needed. Now for the malicious compliance. They wanted us to just come to the board meeting and present what is going on in our address. We hadn't told them yet that we had the pictures, but to summarize real fast how our HOA works, the board hires an outside company to do the grunt work. Let's call it Bentry Management. We go to the meeting and sit down. Bentry Management has the one in control of our account, and I swear to you, she looked like a Karen, so the name fits for her. As time goes by in the meeting, we get to discuss what is happening at our house. We present the timelines and tell them about the truck being smashed, and just 2 days later we get a letter. We ask what dates the investigator was out for that time. Karen refuses to answer it. She argues ignorantly that we should keep better care of our stuff, as if it was our fault. Then comes to the mailbox incident. We tell her that we have reason to believe that the investigator is the one that is causing damages to our property, and is harassing us. Karen denies this and says that is impossible, and she knows him personally. Oh, is that so? I ask. She says, yes, why? I then pull out my laptop out of my book bag that I'd been hiding, open it up to the video file already loaded, and show it to the entire board. Enter Exhibit A, I say out loud, and played the video. Karen's face is bright red. She says that it is not her investigator. I then also pulled out the letter about the mailbox, which was complete with date. It matches the cooked on timestamp on the video. She still tries to claim it's not them. No, it's a coincidence. I'm sorry, but you have a vandal and it's not us. It's not. I let the video play, knowing she's falling into a pit right now. As the man walks towards my car, you can plain as day see Bentry Management on his shirt. She's no longer red now, she's white as a ghost. The board looks over at her and asks what she's going to do about this. Karen is silent, and has nothing, except a few noises which I assume was her brain trying to comprehend what just happened. I then proceed to bring up a previous case, which I happened to remember before we left the meeting, where we had a grass violation beside our house. Now, this area they were claiming was actually not visible from the sidewalk due to the house's shape. I asked point blank, has at any time your investigators walked on our property illegally trespassing? Knowing as per their rules they aren't allowed to do that. Karen is visibly shaking now and mutters out, no, of course not, with her head down, unable to maintain eye contact with me. She probably feels that I have more evidence, but unfortunately I didn't. So I asked again. She asks, why? Our neighbor, whom are lawyers, right next door to us, stands up and says, actually, that's not true. I have witnessed one of your investigators go between our houses and poke around the trash bins. Bingo. I didn't even realize she had this information. I couldn't have asked for more better timing. Karen at this point just starts arguing with our neighbors about no proof. The board proceeds to apologize for the incident, and they were going to discuss what is going to happen in the future about this. At that point, the meeting is over. A month passes, and we get a letter that a new person will be in charge for Bentry Management, and new investigators. She was fired that night. Since she was fired, my father tells me we only get the occasional blip of errors, but they correct it immediately, and don't bother us really anymore. See, security cameras will save your life one day. I don't really understand what the whole motivation behind these vandal attacks were, though. I mean, maybe if they were like trying to give them a fine for it, I could understand, but it was like they were breaking these people's stuff just to try and get them to move out. Oh well, I guess we'll never know. But we have a pretty quick question of the day, which is, teachers of Reddit, what is the worst parent conference you've ever had? I had a student fail my class, and I thought that I'd been emailing with their parents throughout the semester. Turns out the parents did not speak English and relied upon their children to translate for them. Their older sibling was studying abroad, so the student was able to hide everything from the parents. Once they came home, the jig was up. The parents could not believe their child had lied for months, so we had a face-to-face meeting. It was so awful to see their faces crumble in shame and humiliation as their oldest child translated the meeting. Oh, I was just starting to think that the kid was the one with access to the email and was just doing it all himself. An unintended one, when an undergrad I was teaching requested a formal meeting with me, her mother, and the dean of the college at the university. She had received a 97% on an essay, and she and her mother were both in tears demanding that I be reprimanded and retrained for unfair grading policies. I think my mouth was agape the entire time. I mean, how can you be such a perfectionist that a 97 is like considered a bad thing? It's not even something that's gonna bring your overall grade down at all. Not quite a parent-teacher conference, but it was after I got my first cell flip phone long ago, when they were just coming out. An 8th grader stole it. My wife called the phone, and the guy who answered was dumb enough to give her his name. It was a parent who was using it. The kid confesses to taking it, and the parents came in. Admin confronted the parents about it, explaining that we just wanted the phone back. The parents tore into the kid for confessing he took the phone, and told him his birthday was cancelled for ratting on them. What the heck is wrong with this family? From my wife, teacher of 5+ years. A 2nd grade parent had earbuds in her ears the entire time, and looked at her phone the entire time. When my wife complimented her daughter and told her that she was doing well, the parent laughed and said, "She's a brat." It's always interesting to see what kind of house these kids come from. I was talking to the parent of her kindergarten student and telling her ways she could help her child at home. She suddenly says, "Do you get paid to do this?" I say, yeah. She says, "Well, I don't." Then swiped all the papers off the table, stood up and walked out. I was like, okay then. Well, you know, the best parents are the ones that leave the schools to raise their kids for them. Well, that's all we have. Hopefully you enjoyed more stories, so I'll talk to you guys next time.